Everyone, I'm Rosaria. I'm a little Italian ball of energy, enthusiasm, curiosity, and passion. I'm originally Italian, but I live in the Netherlands since 19 years, and I have two boys, 9 and 10 years old, and a Dutch husband. I love all things learning and sharing what I learned and connecting to people, growing together. I'm totally passionate also about customer experience and happiness as well. So for me, it's really all about how can I bring more happiness into the world. I love yellow. Nature, sunflowers, qigong, and intuitive painting. And how I'm doing right now, I'm really a mixture of excitement and anxiety, I guess. Though I have to say it's now really just more excitement because of our guest today, indeed. Because as you will see, I really hope that I will, with the questions that we will ask, we'll get really the full human out of who we have in front of us today, Anthony Hitt. And before we start the interview, I want to share with you guys some picture to tell you the story of how I first met Anthony and why I believe that even behind his amazing title and role that you have seen also in the introduction, he's the CEO of a massive real estate in US, but he's an incredible human being and incredible kind as well. So if I can do the share screen, let's see, bear with me if this works. So the first time I met Anthony was actually here at the very first time that I introduced my book, Yellow Goldfish, to a US audience. So there were about 300 people in that room, and like you can hear my accent. My accent is not American proof. So I was totally stressed out, like with really dry mouth. And then after my talk, there comes this guy and his team coming to say how much my message has resonated with him. And I was like, oh, really? Was I even to understand in my accent? And then we start having a really beautiful connection and conversation, which is all for me what learning and sharing is. And then later on, we had a workshop together with Sam Phelps, which is my co-author, and we're sitting next to each other. And he started sharing with me how it would be in Amsterdam in the following month, and I was planning an happiness retreat because every single year he chooses a theme for his employees to go deeper in, and that year was happiness. So then the next thing I know is that he actually comes to Amsterdam 2 months later. In fact, just the very same day as the day after that I had got my book, my very first copy of the book. So what you also might see on social media were those pictures together. But for me, there are two key aspects to this trip. And Anthony, I might not even have ever told you this, but like what happened was that I told Anthony and his partner Sean to come to a certain station where I would pick them up. They got the wrong train, they got to the wrong station. And I was there incredibly agitated. I'm like, oh my God, I sent Anthony to the wrong station. How am I gonna get him? He's calling me with a US mobile number. I was like anxious. And there comes Anthony, goes like, no worries whatsoever, with the maximum kindness, like nothing, anything about you're wasting my time or like you're making me get lost in bloody Zandam. He just comes, we'll take a taxi and get there. And he comes down from the taxi with a bunch of flowers, yellow roses. I was like, again, the kindness. And he also like really shared a very human part, which I'm not going to say more about here. Anthony, you'll share more with us later if you want. And the very final thing then was the last bit was that we start talking about the retreat we were going to do, and that's exactly this one. So basically, what happened was we decided that Anthony ran this retreat on happiness for his team. He asked me at a point, "Can you come actually to US and facilitate and do something on happiness for us?" But it needs to be very experiential. And I was like, Anthony, what I could do is I've been doing intuitive painting for 5 years. I draw paintings and all, but I've never facilitated actually a session. And it was like, no worry, I love it. Great ideas, we'll make it happen. And once again, for me, that was true leadership. He acknowledged my passion and he just let me do it, even if it was the first time. And in addition to that, what you see here, this is Amazon box, and it's again, Anthony and his team carrying it themselves all the way up to Eagle Nest, 3,000 meters high. So what you see behind me is that background. So we go up. We actually stopped the this. What's the right name for it, Anthony?
I guess like a gondola.
Gondola. It goes up. We made an incredible stuff to get there, and then what do you think a CEO of a company does? He starts mounting himself all the stand which we needed to paint. So really putting all the work in. I love this picture. All in order to then.
I'm glad you do.
To deliver an amazing experience. So, and with this, without any further ado, I might share some extra picture later, but that's for me why I'm so absolutely astonished and happy to have Anthony here, because for me, Anthony, next to being a CEO of a big company in US, is an amazing leader. So now to you, Anthony, thank you so much for being here. Also here, again, a massive leader, being as our guest for our first time that we have a guest. So just thank you and welcome.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me. And I will tell you, I just love, I always have your energy and Chantel's energy. And I just, what a great way for me to be starting my day this morning. I'd love to do this every day. Not only the enthusiasm and the energy and the wisdom you both have already shared, but also just having that kind of an introduction before I speak. Usually I get about 5 words, and you just first of all, and nobody sees pictures like that. I'm not even sure about those, but thanks for inviting me. I'm happy to be here.
Thank you, Anthony. So then our very first question for you. Now I told all about you, but who is Anthony as humankind? How do you define who is Anthony? Tell us.
Oh my gosh. I think like everyone, we've got, I'm a very complicated person with a very complicated history, but today the role I play in life is I am the CEO of Engel Völkers in the Americas. That means we run about 300 different real estate brokerages throughout the Americas with a little over 5,000 real estate advisors, serving usually the more wealthy clientele in the markets. I've been with Engel Völkers since 2010. Prior to Engel Völkers, I did sell real estate as an agent, and an estate agent, as I think most of our clients or most of the listeners today would be aware, in Los Angeles. And prior to that, entrepreneurial. So always trying new things and new ideas. And I've only been employed by another person or by another organization twice in my life. Once my very first job at a bike shop, and now my current job as the CEO. In between, I was always self-employed, off and doing something. And so, but maybe as we go through the conversation, I'll share more bits and pieces along the way. But that's my role today. I'm also, I am married. I married my husband, Sean. We've been together 33 years this year, but the first day we could be legally married in California, where we lived at the time, we were married, which happened to be our 20th anniversary. So we kept our anniversary date. And so that's I guess, that's who I am right now in humankind. Always evolving and changing though.
And I remember for the 33, we said, oh, that there's a really, really big party, though now with the COVID story, maybe not. Is it something? So our next question would be, what is your definition of happiness and love? And do you want to share with us also a bit more about, what it means for you also in relation to the number 3, which for me was a very touching story, if you feel like
sharing. Sure. Yeah, I had a feeling because, most of the podcasts or interviews I do, the person who's interviewing me only knows, a little bit about what they've read. And that's why I was a little concerned about this, because you know a lot about me, not only in our personal conversations, but also at the retreat that we were at, where we all shared a lot. So I have to admit, I'm just a little curious where we're going to go and how much I'm going to share. But for me, I don't know. I think there's a lot of book definitions of happiness and love, and I do think they're very intertwined. For me, it's a feeling. It's a good feeling. It's a warm feeling. It's a safe feeling. It's a pleasurable feeling. It's an energy. So for me, and I think that's the same. I think happiness maybe is more internal, and just about your surroundings and your existence and your contributions, where love obviously brings in either another person or family members or friends or communities, but still it's a good feeling. Oh, the number three. I think this also, and I don't want to go down to this road more than you want to, but as a gay man in the United States, and I'm in my 50s now, so growing up in the 60s and 70s in Missouri, which is where I'm from, I think something else that has added to my happiness is authenticity. There was a long time in my life where I couldn't share my authentic self. I couldn't say that I was a gay man, and to be sitting as the CEO of a brand who is out and who is proud and who is married and who can introduce my husband at a corporate event, that authenticity also adds to happiness. I think it's very hard. At least it was very hard for me to really be happy until I could be very authentic with the people around me about who I was. But the number three is an important number to Sean and I. And it comes out of the fact that when we first met, back in the 80s, the reality was we couldn't be out. As a matter of fact, when we first met, we were both still dating, someone of the opposite sex. We had to be just friends, and then just roommates. And so we created a code to basically say those three words that any person who is in love with another person should be able to say, not only privately, but publicly, and that's "I love you." And our code was the number three. We would work the number three into a sentence. If we were on the telephone, "I saw three squirrels playing this afternoon in the front yard," or if we were in a place where we could, maybe I could bump him on the foot with a three taps or something, and that was my way of privately and covertly saying I love you. And so the number three has always been very important to us. And interestingly enough, and I know you know this, Rosaria, but when the iPhone came out about 12 years ago now, I'm not sure whether he was the first one to do it or I was the first one to do it, but one of us saw a three someplace, wherever it was, and we took a photo of that and we texted it to the other person. And that's begun something that we still do to this day. We have collected thousands of number threes from all over the world. And we still text them to each other. We still have a collection of them. We've made art from them. We've made fabrics from them. I've given speeches on that subject. So I think again, that's my story about the number three. And so I guess the idea that this is our 33rd anniversary must be something even extra special because it's double threes.
Yes, that's why we were saying we should do party. But thank you so much for sharing it, Anthony. Because also for our participants, I did not have the chance to double check with Anthony if it was okay. So I really felt like, and only after we invited him for this webinar, then I realized only later it's actually even Pride Month. So I was really like, I was wondering. And then but I saw you also had some videos on that. So the question I have is like, what did it take you to get authentic, to go to choose authenticity?
Again, and I think this is back to happiness. It's safety. I grew up in a place that the reason there was that code was because there was a fear for safety at that time. I grew up in an area and a time where in the elementary school or the junior high school that I went to in the U.S., where a boy had been hung in the boys' bathroom just the year before I started school there. Because the color of his skin, he was black. While I was in high school, a boy about my age, maybe a year or two older, was brutally murdered because he had supposedly hit on another boy along the way. And this is long before the Matthew Shepard story, if any of you know that story, that became very public. This is 15 years before that. So the idea of me being my authentic self and letting people know who I was, or just acting in the way that that someone would who happens to be a gay man could be a threat to my life and my safety, or people who are around me. And as I came out to a few of my closest friends, I lost half of my friends on telling them that. So my friendship. So there was already just innately, and because of my surroundings, just a fear of being myself. So it took me a long time to get to the place where I felt comfortable sharing who I was. Even to a point that when we finally moved from St. Louis, Missouri to Santa Monica, California, it was very tough for me to be who I was. But I lived in an area where it was very much like a lot of Europe. The fact is, it wasn't an issue. Nobody cared, and it wasn't on them anymore. It was on me to feel safe and just to become, to share who I was. But it's small steps. I think that's anytime you're in a situation like that, it's small steps. And I would experiment a little bit with how much I was willing to share. And as I would get positive feedback, or I wouldn't get negative feedback, then I would share a little more and a little more. And to a point that on the day that we got married, and this is again only 13 years ago now, we sent out an evite to all of our friends and clients about the wedding. 90% of the people, no, 99% of the people who came to our wedding on the beach that day in short notice were straight. They were straight friends, because we didn't have a lot of gay friends. So even at that time, it was something. But I think that moment, the day we got married, was the day that I felt, wait a minute, if 150 straight people who didn't even know we were gay, 36 hours earlier, will come and stand on the beach and tear up as this moment's happening, maybe it's okay for me to be myself. And all the way to the point of, even when I was taking this responsibility here to move to New York, I was very concerned that when I met, I didn't know a lot about Germany, I didn't know a lot about Europe, and when I met Engel Völkers, the founder of Engel Völkers, I was about to sign my contract, and I all of a sudden those feelings I had as a kid came rushing back. I don't want him to sign. I don't want to sign this contract and then be found out as being gay and then be fired or have this thing fall apart. And so I laid the pen down and said, I have to tell you something. I'm gay and I'm married to my husband Sean. And he looked at me with confusion, which scared me. But he didn't know how to respond, because he thought it was such an unusual thing for me to say to him. And he said, so are we inviting him to dinner as well? I mean, he just didn't know what to do with it. And because he didn't care, it wasn't part of the conversation. And again, so it's just those types of successes. Those are two big ones for me that have allowed me to be who I am. And it's interesting, because as you become more authentic in a safe way with who you are, the power of that authenticity creates happiness. And the power of authenticity and happiness and love gives you a lot of abilities to grow and have the success that you're wanting to have in your life. At least that's been my experience.
Yeah, and I would say it connects you. I mean, one of the reasons why we also connected and why it also stayed with me is because when you told me the story of the tree in Kansas, I still remember where, it really, really touched me. And I had no idea what the situation was in US. I didn't know now myself the story of the moment that you signed the contract. So would you say that it was because the times had evolved? Or would you say that it's because even in Germany, there is even more tolerance or more compassion, more openness to diversity than in US?
The world in the US and the world in Europe is definitely different today than it was 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 50 years ago. I think there are still people who are more progressive with their thinking, and people who are certainly less progressive. But I think it's all of those things. And Mr. Völkers and our brand and where I've lived are also major metro areas, and metro areas are typically have learned how to live together with everyone, and whether that's acceptance or tolerance, but at least there is a safety about being who you are. And I think that's what's attractive to a lot of people in metro areas, but it's also kind of forced. When you've got this kind of density, you really kind of have to say, okay, I'm going to be accepting of the people around me. And that's, I think that's part of it. I just think I do think things are changing though, and getting, better. There's, I don't want to make this a pride speech, but the realities are there are countries where things are a lot better, but there are still a lot of places in our world where things are not good. Until just recently, in the US, there were still almost half of our US states that could fire you for being a part of the LGBTQ plus community. There are still countries that will put you to death for your sexuality. So it is better, but we're not there yet.
There is work to do, and I guess it has to do also with leadership. So I guess, what is your leadership recipe also for driving change in the world and in your world? So creating a happy workplace or happy customers or driving any change.
Yeah, I get asked this question quite a bit, and I read a lot about leadership. I study other leaders and what they do and how they do it. I don't know that I have a style as a leader that's any different than just my style or what I hope to be as my philosophy just as a human, and that's listen to people, that's understand what people are saying, that's be authentic with my own thoughts and feelings, to be honest, but to be constructive, and then do my best to help people achieve whatever it is they're wanting to achieve. You can't help someone else achieve their goals if you don't know their goals, and the only way you're going to know those goals is to start with a relationship that allows them to trust you in sharing those kinds of ideas and taking it in and going from there. So I think that's kind of how I try to operate. I'm certainly not a perfect human being; none of us are, and I'm definitely a work in progress. But I would say that's my style, is to try to understand what people are wanting out of life, what makes them happy, what makes them feel like they're contributing, and then to do whatever I can to help them. And by the way, that doesn't mean that I'm always walking around in our organization going, how can I help you? Sometimes the best way to help somebody is to say, this isn't the place for you. And so that's there is, even in the, sometimes it's about building a career or a life in this organization. Sometimes it's about helping somebody realize this is not the place that's going to allow them to be who they want to be. And I just want to make sure we understand that there is a balance there. It doesn't mean you're always giving everybody everything. Sometimes it's about letting some people go and connecting them maybe with some other opportunities out there.
It's like the story also of the CEO of Southwest, which at some point told the customer who was only complaining, and I see there Stan Phelps is also one of our guests today, and we both talk about it in Pink Goldfish and in Yellow Goldfish. That is, like, sometimes it's just not the place for you. If you only complain, then this is not the offers or service for you. And similarly on the workplace.
By the way, I also saw Stan was on the call when I came on this morning, and I'm thinking, wait a minute, how am I the first guest when you've got Stan Phelps right there, and he's your publisher? Why is he not your first guest? But I'm sure that day is coming up, and I will definitely try to tune in for that one.
Absolutely, it's coming for sure. We wanted to start also from the people also in the company, in the organization. So that's why that you are our first guest, but Stan is definitely on deck.
Good.
And talking about books, I see a thumbs up. Talking about books, Anthony, which book changed your life?
Now I feel a lot of pressure that I'm going to have to say Yellow Goldfish and Purple Goldfish, especially. But if I will exclude books written by authors on this podcast, that I would probably go with probably the one that has had the most. I mean, there's so many. My father, when I was 14, I was a very overweight kid with a lot of issues. He didn't even know all the issues at 14. Again, back to the gay thing, and also I was raised on a farm, and I'm not a farm boy. That's just the reality. I'm not. I love going there now even more than I did as a kid. But I wanted the office on Park Avenue in New York City, which, by the way, I'm in the office now on Park Avenue in New York City. But I would say he gave me this book, I Dare You, written by the founder of Ralston Purina Companies, William Danforth. And it's a very dated book. I still have a copy, and I shared it with a friend recently. It's very, very dated. It was written in the 40s or 50s. It's all about how a young man should learn all these things and grow up and find a nice young woman who will basically be his servant for life. And so it's a little dated, but it also talked about goal setting and positive affirmation and good health, and there were good messages there. And so I think that one kind of started me in a direction. Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill was certainly one, but I would say the one that was probably the most influential and the most valuable was by The Four Agreements by Michael Ruiz. I still believe that's the one that made me really look at myself more introspectively, look at the world differently, put things in a perspective that allowed me to calm down, relax, just not think that everybody was out to get me or hurt me. That basically, the reality is we can all love each other and everyone else, but we're kind of all in it for ourselves. And that's not only us, but that's everyone else around you. And so those four agreements about being impeccable with your word, and the idea that your word does matter, and it can do good and it can do harm, and it can do irreparable harm if you're not cautious with that. Not taking things personally, knowing that people are doing things for their own reasons. That was a big one for me. There's an old movie called The Bad News Bears, and it talks about not making assumptions, because it makes an ass out of you and me, was the whole kind of the joke back at the time. But not assuming that you know why things are happening or why things are. So not making assumptions. And my favorite, just always do your best. I was a Boy Scout, and that was one of our mottos too, is to always do our best. So those four agreements, the book, The Four Agreements by Michael Ruiz, is probably one of my all-time favorites, and one that probably had the most impact on helping me be who I am today.
I was wondering if that was going to be indeed the book. When you start to go there, you and Think and Grow Rich, I was like, oh, maybe I don't know you that well.
You knew I was going to get there, because I one thing about me is I am kind of one track. When I get on something, I'm the same way when I go to a restaurant. If I find the one I like, I stick with the same thing. But I do love that book.
You shared about this book during the Elite Retreat in Vail, Colorado. And I didn't know about this book, and I've read it after that. And by now I've read also the Fifth Agreement. And I was thinking, oh my God, if I had read this book when I was a child, or even just 5 years ago or 10 years ago. So I'm absolutely happy I read it in the last couple of years, but
I will highly recommend, and I don't know a lot about the audience here, but if you have issues that you're still holding on to related to your parents, or someone who was raised you in your life, I think this book is the one that can help you in a big way. For me, just realizing that my parents are human, that seems like an obvious, but they're human, and they were in their late teens, early 20s, and they were doing the best they could with what they had, with what they knew at the time, based on the way they were raised. I can't even imagine, me. I mean, I know me as a 20-year-old being responsible for another human. And that's exactly who my parents were. And that perspective really helped me. But I think it's a great book for that. By the way, what's the Fifth Agreement? I haven't read it yet. I'm writing notes over here.
It's the follow-up, and it's also really, really great book.
Yeah. I'll have to check it out.
And so you actually mentioned also Yellow Goldfish. Do you still remember? I know that you read it now 3 years ago. Do you still have any key insight with you? And also, how does that correlates with the role that you think companies can play in actually driving happiness for customers and employees?
I remember, I'm a big fan. This is Stan's on the call here, but I'm a big fan of all the Goldfish books. Purple was the first one I read, and then I think it was Blue. I think is Blue's Technology.
Yeah.
Yep. I think that was the second one. And because when I met you, yours was not even out yet. It was about to come out. Like I said, I think when we met in Amsterdam, it had just officially dropped.
Exactly. Yeah.
I think I was one of your first pre-orders on Amazon in the US, because I wanted it. I think all of the insights there. What was so interesting to me is, after reading the book, but meeting you and then sharing the retreat with you, is just see how the topics there can be applied to our work lives, to our leadership roles, to our businesses. So I can't think of any one specific piece right now that comes there, but I know that it all really resonated with me and with my group. And again, I think I probably now internalized some of the things I've learned, and I do them automatically, with maybe even without even giving credit to you or whoever the authors were that shared that insight with me along the way.
Do you believe that companies can play a role then in increasing the happiness of customers and employees?
Of course, of course. We'll start with employees. The reality is, a lot of employees are spending. Oh, we're home now.
Yeah, I'm like
I know. Oh, by the way, let me see if I can do this here. I'm not sure if this will show up on camera, but we did the interpret. What do you call the painting? Intro. You're painting.
Intuitive painting.
Yeah. Here's. Oh, let me see if it'll show up. Does that show up on camera there? There's my background on my phone is still the painting I did of a number 3 at our retreat.
Can I show that one? I have it also here on picture. If you want.
Oh, there. I have decided I no longer want to be around you and a camera. That I'm looking pretty rough there. You look great, but the rest of us are looking a little. However, that looks like your painting shirt that you're wearing today. So
yes, it is. That's the reason for wearing it.
That's awesome. That is awesome. No, I mean, if you consider that employees are a full-time employee is spending 40 to 60 hours a week connected to your organization, and if you take sleep hours out, I mean, a lot of times it's more time in their work environment than it is with their family environment. And so obviously that's going to have an impact on their happiness. I mean, it's not just compensation. I'm a big person that I believe in data. You and I've talked about like NPS scores, and I know the happiness scores that you've been working on now for a while. But we did an employee survey with a third-party company here about 3 or 4 months ago. And the data was very interesting to see the level of engagement that our employees have, and what makes them feel good about their contribution to the organization, but also the things that we needed to improve. And I think that's back to one of the things that you have to know what it is. If you can't measure it, you can't improve it. If you can't track it, I mean, so you have to know. And for us, we learned some things. Our productivity is up during COVID with people working at home and all of that, but there's some satisfaction that's not as high because people have been through a lot. And so now we're looking at new ways on how do we improve that culture? How do we improve that engagement? How do we do our part to help make sure that the people who are a part of this organization, whether they're employees in our corporate offices here in New York City, or whether they're anybody in our organization in the Americas or globally, what is it we can do to be a positive contribution to their lives and their happiness? And I think books like Yellow Goldfish will give people really good guidance on some of the ideas and some of the things they can do to not only measure, but then actually improve that.
Yeah. And Anthony, is there a brand that you reckon contributes to your happiness, that you see when I look at this brand and what this company does, I can really see that they do things in a way that contributes to your happiness, but also to other people's happiness, so that you really see them active in bringing more happiness into the world?
Well, as the CEO of this company and where my paycheck comes from, I'll start with Engel Völkers because they definitely contribute to my happiness, because they allow me to do so many incredible things and to lead so many incredible people, and I am having such a good time doing it, and it's interesting to have that influence and that audience. And to be paid for doing it. So number one, I would have to go with Engel Völkers as a brand, because I think we are doing a lot of the right things to be, good corporate citizens, but also good employers and good partners with the communities that we're serving. Now there's my company pitch over to the side. From there, I don't know. I mean, different companies for different reasons, but you and I've talked about the idea of, can you be happy and unhappy at the same time? Amazon, makes me happy because it's incredibly convenient for me to get things. And I don't like shopping. I don't like going out. I like the idea that I can push a couple buttons and come. So on one side, they make me feel good and they make me feel happy. On the other side, when you maybe you see some of the news about how they treat employees or the environment and some of those issues, that makes me a little unhappy. And so, my iPhone, a similar situation. I love all the information that I have, from Apple, and I like the way Apple presents itself as a brand. I like the positive things that Apple, I think, tries to do for the world that it serves. On the other hand, there are things about Apple that are not as positive and that I don't like. And so if you look at it from that standpoint, I don't. There's a lot of brands that contribute to my happiness. Whether it's a Hermes, I love an Hermes tie. That makes me feel good and happy. But there's always the counter side of that. So I don't. There's not a brand that specifically comes out and says that goes, I love that brand. I like everything they do, and they are the one that I would put number one on my list. I don't have that.
And I guess the B Corp movement, like the corporations, I don't know if you're even familiar with the B Corp model. It's probably not as strong in US yet as it is in Europe. Or are you familiar?
What was that? What was it?
The B Corporation. So all the companies get a special certification because what they do, it's really for the better of the world. So like the Patagonia of this world, Danone most recently got it. I know quite few in Europe, but less in US.
Patagonia, yeah, I don't know of that. Patagonia, by the way, is one of those companies. I love a lot about that leadership, that company, the way the organization's been built, and their contribution to actually creating a lot of happiness for a lot of people in a lot of ways.
Yeah, because there are things indeed that companies can do so that they can really contribute to more happiness into the world. And we hope indeed there will be more and more.
Yeah, that's the first step to having happiness, is to decide that's something that's important to you. And also understanding that it's not a constant state at a 10, at a level 10 either. Happiness ebbs and flows. That is the reality. And happiness and unhappiness can exist at the same time. And getting all that. But you're right, you have to own it yourself. If happiness is something that's important to you, then you have to constantly work at it. Just like working at your weight or your health or your finances. Happiness is one of those that you have to decide that's what I want to do, and work on a plan. I am a bit of a person of routine. I do believe that for me, starting my day with a routine where I do meditate. Not a pro by any means, but I have my little bit of time to try to clear my mind. A little exercise, more would probably be good. Eating well in the morning. I like a calendar. When the alarm goes off, I have my routine. But for me, I also have a happy playlist. So when my alarm goes off in the morning, it's going to start with songs that make me feel good. Some of them are like the song that was playing when we started today, the Happy by Farnell, but also just songs that from my childhood that I remember that there's always with music, there's always usually we have associations, and a lot of songs make me happy, would not make you happy, but I have a positive association. So I play those songs. I have a playlist in the morning, and that playlist runs about the same time that it takes me to start my day and be able to walk out the door. So that's a big part of it. But that's probably the only thing that I look at now. Again, I also think happiness is about diluting the unhappiness, because things that upset us are going to creep and come. That is life. And so you need to find that way to dilute that, or at least counterbalance it. So, I'm in a stressful position. I'm at a time that my father passed away a few years ago. My mother is getting up in years. And so, there are probably more dramatic things that are happening in my life today and will happen as I get older. And so it's really important that I balance that with more positive things. So whether that's positive experiences, like for me, it's being in Hawaii, whether that's about reading or listening or educating myself or just finding those moments, for me, that makes me happy. Interesting too, as we look at the elements of happiness, simplicity also makes me happy. I'm a big believer that less is more, and we learned this. I don't know how much time we have, but I can tell you a story where that kind of really resonated with me. I used to live in Malibu, California, and we had the dream house. I mean, it was a big house. I could see right there on the water. I could see the water, but it's a part of Malibu that is notorious for these big fires. And a lot of times you'll hear news stories, especially in the Americas, about big fires coming through Malibu and burning down these celebrity mansions and all of this. So we had been living in this particular house for a year or so when one of the first big fires got closer to our house, and they said you'll probably have to evacuate. And we had never been in that situation of having to evacuate. And so at the time we had a BMW a Z4, which is a 2-seater car with a very small trunk, and we had a 150-pound Newfoundland dog. So 2 of us and a dog was going to fill up the front of the car. That was going to leave a very small space in the back for us to take what was important to us. And as we walked through our house, and obviously some cherished photos and things like that, we started realizing that we didn't really care enough about the other things to take them with us. And then the question was, wait a minute, if we don't care about these things enough to want to save them, why do we have them? Why are we putting out the energy to own them, to house them, to clean them, to insure them, whatever that was? And ultimately that changed the way we buy things. We're much simpler about what we own. We don't buy anything unless we both love it. When it comes to clothing, we're big believers that if one thing comes in, one thing has to go out. And that simplicity also offloaded, if you will, a lot of stresses and a lot of burdens, which also, so I think simplicity also is a practice that we have that does lead to happiness. I agree. And again, diluting all the other things that create hassles. Whether it's people or things or responsibilities, if they're not, I'm not sure who the lady is who has the shows about simplicity, but whether something sparks joy, that's her idea. If it doesn't spark joy, then you don't keep it. I don't think that's just how you organize a closet. I think that's how you organize a life. And if it doesn't spark joy, then goodbye. And make room for new things, or just make room, period, for you to be happy.
I guess since you mentioned it, indeed, simplicity is actually also one of the 9 factors of happiness that we identified with Stan in Yellow Goldfish. And actually, if I put them up for a moment as well, because one thing that we plan, in fact, for the next show to really go more in depth into this one. Would you then say, Anthony, that simplicity is the one element that contributes the most to your happiness? I mean, you also spoke about health, because when you mentioned your meditation in the morning, exercise, good food, what would you say are the most contributing to your happiness?
I think this is interesting. A long time ago, and I don't remember, I think the first place I heard it was an author by the name of Paul Meyer from Waco, Texas. But he had something, and I think I've seen a lot of ideas. There's like a circle of life or a wheel of life. And the idea is you could go through each of those items, like you go through each of these and number them, health on a scale of 1 to 10, purpose 1 to 10, play 1 to 10, etc. And then you could connect the dots. You'd see how your wheel looks. And if it wasn't balanced, your wheel doesn't roll so well. And so when I look at all of these, I think they're all extremely important. If you don't have your health, it's hard to have a purpose, or it's hard to play the way you want to play. If you don't have integrity, at least for me, I'm not going to sleep well at night, and that's going to affect my health. Simplicity is a big piece of that. So if I had to put one as slightly higher than the others, I think it would be purpose. I think it's knowing, you're finding it or working on finding it. I don't think you have to know your purpose, but I think you have to be constantly trying to know your why. And so I would probably put purpose top of my list. Simplicity and health and play and integrity and nature and smiling, autonomy. All of those would be very, very close ties for second, though.
And I love that you also mentioned the wheel of life, because actually what we are turning into this, when we are just working now with the designer, also with Chantel, to turn this into a wheel of happiness, where we can all score from 0 to 10 each of those elements, because that's exactly it. It's about, when you also spoke about diluting the unhappiness, you can dilute the unhappiness if you bring in more happiness. So looking at this, which of those elements do you think that on a 0 to 10 scale is still scoring low for you? And therefore you would have to put more effort and more habits in place in order to do more of it in your life?
Oh, I guess if I'm being totally authentic, probably play. I probably work too hard. Or too much. I probably don't take enough time to really play. I'm the guy that my boss in Germany, Sven Odia, he in my first years had to tell me, you have vacation, take it. And by the way, take 2 weeks, because the first week you're going to be easing out, and then the second week is when you're actually going to have the time to relax and recharge and move forward. So I would guess play would be the one that I still need to work on. I am getting better at trying to connect what I do, like that event that we do. The Elite Retreat is what it's called. It used to be called the Anthony Hitt Invitational. And the reason that exists is quite selfish. As you said, each year there's a topic that's really important to me, and I will study that topic and I'll learn about that topic, and I get to the point where people around me know I'm kind of a broken record because I'm always talking about that particular topic. And so that's a nice place where I was able to take something that was important to me and find that there was an audience of people in our organization that topic was interesting to them too. And so I could play and have fun, meet other people with shared mindsets and curiosities, and so that's where I try to balance. Let's pull the work and the play and the personal together, and that allows me to do that. But yeah, play would probably be the one that I'd have to say. Maybe not. Maybe that's in third place. Maybe purpose is a 10. The others are all 9, and then maybe 8.5. 8 is play. Oh, maybe 7. Maybe 7.
I love that you say that one, because I need to remind you then indeed of how much you played during that elite retreat.
I have
of course a picture for you to just show that. Look at you, that's a playful.
We all need to. I mean, life is
playful Anthony, and you know that also from the science of happiness, but just looking at this picture, you can feel yourself back in that moment and actually live the play and the emotion connected to it. So I hope I'm sending you some play vibe.
Thank you, Rosaria. Thank you, everyone who's on the listening to the podcast today, either live or down the road. I will let you know that I love reaching out and talking to people globally. And if you will, that's how Rosaria and I met. I tracked her across the globe. But you can follow me on Instagram. I'm not as good as I should be there lately. I've been avoiding social a little bit, but it's just at Anthony Hitt, ANTHONYHITT. And I'd love to hear from anyone and have a conversation and get to know you. And so thank you once again so much for inviting me. And I do feel very honored to be the first guest on this new podcast. I have a feeling this is going to go a long way, and there's going to be a large audience that will get a lot from this. So good work, all of you.
Thank you, Anthony.
Bye.